Hi there everyone, Nubkeks here, and welcome to another tier list video for Heroes of the Storm. In this one, I'm going to be ranking the maps. What are the best battlegrounds in the game? What are the worst battlegrounds in the game? And as always, of course, I'm curious to hear your thoughts and what you think about these maps. Because I imagine there might be a little bit of debate about, well, I'll play some of these, but this is what I think. And let's dive right into it. Actually, before I place these maps, one thing to note, I am pretty much rating these maps based off how they are now. Obviously, some of the maps had some, reworks or significant balance changes. So I'm not going to dwell too much on how they used to be. I'll try to fill you guys in on the history at least a little bit as we go through. But I'm not going to try to let that influence the rating too much while we look at it here. Okay, let's dive into it. First up, no surprise really. First up, we've got Haunted Mines going into the F tier. I'm sorry, Haunted Mines. I'm sorry. I think the map has a cool layout. It's got a cool and interesting idea and design. You have your basic map, and then you've got the mines section, which is an entirely separate map that essentially exists underneath the first one. And you've got, I think, 4 mine entrances, north, south, east and west, or east and west. I don't know how it's going to show up on the video. But you've got those mine entrances that you can use to enter or leave the mines. And then the objective, a bunch of skeletons spawn in the mines. You can kill those, collect their skulls, which will power up a golem, which will push your lane. There's also a big boss golem in the middle that drops lots of skulls, but it obviously takes quite a while to kill. And both teams have a golem that pushes their lane, and the strength is proportionate to how many skulls you collected, and those golems swap lanes every time. There's also, there's some cool stuff happening with mercenary camps. You have siege giants, which I think are really fun mercenary camps, so that's cool. And they also have sappers, which got added in from Towers of Doom in an attempt to rework the map. So sappers kind of in the middle of the map beside the lanes, very easy to contest for those sappers, but they add a good bit of damage. The reason I put Haunted Mines in the F tier, you're probably listening to that and saying, hey, Nubkeks, that sounds pretty interesting. But then I also imagine there's quite a few people watching that are going, I've never heard of Haunted Mines. What map is this? And that, for me, is the main reason this is in the F tier. Yeah, poor old Haunted Mines. You just simply, it's not in any of the actual matchmaking queues. It's not there. Can't play it in quick match, unranked, ranked, whatever. It's not there and hasn't been there for forever. When the map first came out, there was quite a lot of differences, and it was riddled with balance problems, and they tried to tweak it a little bit. Then they removed it from the game. They reworked it, added it back into the game, and went, wait, this still has loads of balance problems. So then they've removed it again. You can play it in custom games, and I actually did a video, an Azebo video, actually maybe only a month or so ago, where I played a custom game against Heku on Haunted Mines with viewers from both our sides, and that was super fun. So if you want to check out Haunted Mines and see what it actually looks like, you can see it there. But yeah, if you can get some friends together, or you can add in some AI, I suppose, you can actually play this on custom games. But that essentially just puts it straight in the F tier. It can't get out of there because you just simply really can't play this map. I would say if this map was playable live right now, I'd probably move it up into maybe the D tier. Maybe C, but probably I'd say the D tier would be a good spot for this map if it was actually playable. Because I think it does have a lot of balance issues, but at least it's kind of interesting, kind of unique, It does as well share a lot of art assets with Cursed Hollow. So it's not as visually interesting as some of the other maps, or the Sapper camps are just taken off Towers of Doom, for example. So yeah, but I think it's it's an all right map to play, though a lot of balance problems, but it's kind of fun, and I think it's more fun in a way, seeing as you can't actually play it. But there you go. Yeah, F tier. And this is one thing I will say. I think you gotta brace yourselves for the next these few tiers, right? I think there's some pretty bad maps in the game, and you do have to play those maps. They are in quick match mostly, not usually in ranked, but you do have to play those maps. I honestly don't see a problem with just adding Haunted Mines back in. And so what if it's a little bit janky, a little bit broken? It's a bit of variety. It's a bit of fun. Why not? So that's my thoughts on that. Also in the F tier, we're going to be placing, sorry to say it, StarCraft fans, I'm going to put Warhead Junction in the F tier as well, which obviously is a map that's currently playable, and has basically been playable the entire time. Though it's never really featured in ranked, because honestly the map is just bad. What I don't like about this map, so Warhead Junction, I don't like, it's an absolutely massive map. It just feels too big. I think some of the interesting things in HOTS is when you're rotating, you're interacting with different members of your team, you're doing different objectives around the map, and there's a whole lot of strategy in terms of where you go, where the enemy team goes, all of that. I think Warhead Junction is just too big. I think the mercenary camps on it are pretty underwhelming as well. You've got the Firebat camp, you've got the what are the Goliath camp? Are they Goliaths? I'm not sure if they are Goliaths, but you know, the four camp, the 4-pack of like shooty robots and the one guy that fires missiles. I just find those mercenary camps to be quite boring. They just don't really feel like they have very much of an impact on the game, and it takes quite a long time just to get around the map and start picking those up. I guess the big feature of the map is the objective, which are nukes. You can spawn in, the nukes spawn in, and you can channel to capture the nukes, and then you can activate them to blow up structures, or I guess kind of blow up bosses or team fights, that sort of thing. Again, the nukes just feel, for me, really, really underwhelming. They just don't feel like they've got a very, very big impact. They don't feel half as impactful as I think they probably should. I think, again, balance issues were a bit of a problem here, where the nukes originally did, I think, double damage in the center. So there was kind of a skill gameplay, and they had a good bit of power. Blizzard just made them just flat damage in the entire area because of balance reasons. I think now they actually feel quite boring. So yeah, for me, it's just a map which it just feels like it's really big. You're running around, and it feels like nothing has that large of an impact. Even the bosses, there's 2 bosses, and they're kind of cool. They have unique models. I mean, that kind of features in this picture here. But no, nothing about it just feels very exciting. I think I've basically always been pretty bored. I'm pretty disappointed when I see my map as Warhead Junction. I don't think ever once in the entire game have I gone, oh, Warhead. Haven't played that in a while. Can't wait. It's always been a negative reaction for me, which is bad. So that's why it goes in the F tier. In the D tier, then, that's it for the F tier. In the D tier, and again, I think these maps are pretty bad, pretty underwhelming. I'm going to put Garden of Terror into the D tier. Garden of Terror obviously got a big rework. And I think at its core, it is actually, it's a pretty functional map. The map works. It's pretty well balanced, and the gameplay is fine. The problem that I have with Garden of Terror is that it's really, really unoriginal. It just feels like the most generic map in the entire game. It's just like kind of a generic, you know, green garden-y style map. Visually, it's not that exciting. And then the map mechanic is basically just a little bit of Cursed Hollow combined with a little bit of like Tomb of the Spider Queen. You know, that's it. Collect 3 of these garden seeds, and then it will spawn this the boss that will push down each lane. So, you know, instead of collecting coins on Tomb of the Spider Queen, it's just the tribute system from Cursed Hollow, but it basically spawns essentially the spiders from Tomb of the Spider Queen and pushes it down. You know, they disable the structures, but I think the map is, again, quite big, so the structure disabling doesn't feel, again, that particularly significant, I suppose. So yeah, I don't know, like, it's got cool Merc Camps on it. The Merc Camps are relatively interesting. But yeah, for me, it's so unoriginal. It's so uninspired. I think that you could easily not have Garden of Terror in the game, and you wouldn't really mind. Like, everything that's interesting or unique about this, another map does better. So yeah, that's why Garden of Terror, for me, goes in the D tier. You know, a decent map, but ultimately a very boring one. The other map I'm going to put in the D tier is kind of like the opposite of that in a way, and that's Blackhearts Bay. So in comparison to Garden, which is very unoriginal, I think Blackhearts Bay is actually very original and interesting. First of all, it's a weirdly shaped map. It's a very, very big map with a very weird shape to it. It's almost like a triangle. So that in itself is quite different. I think that visually the map is really cool. You know, that you have these like it's kind of like you're walking across like planking across like decks, like piers in the water, like around the center of the map. You know, we've got holes with the water coming through. That's pretty badass, actually. You got the pirate ship, and the pirate ship looks incredible. You got Blackheart yapping away, and that's really fun and thematic. And then, of course, you know, the main mechanic of the map is you kill Merc Camps, or these doubloon camps, and they drop coins, and you collect the coins. You can pay them to Blackheart in the middle, and then he'll bombard structures with his pirate ship. Like, that's all super unique and super interesting and flavorful and fun. You know, I guess the problem with Blackhearts Bay is that it's, again, just horribly imbalanced. And it just, in terms of gameplay, it's just not quite all there. I think for me, the biggest issue is that it feels like, for the most part, to play Blackhearts Bay correctly almost entails interacting with the enemy team as little as possible. You know, you want to be going around and just killing your Merc Camps and collecting your coins. Okay, you still want to soak your waves. Okay, preferably you don't really want to deal with the enemy team. The chests spawn in, and to be honest, well, hang on, we might go to the chest if the enemy team's not there. And one of the problems here is that, you know, when you die, you give all your coins to the enemy team. And then, because you're dead, they can pay them in really easily. So it's really punishing to actually do anything with those coins. It's really punishing to actually be aggressive. Because, you know, while the reward for being aggressive is relatively similar to what it is on other maps, the risk is extremely high. It also kind of stops you from actually pushing the lanes down too far yourself. Because, again, pushing lanes, there's some risk entailed with that. And if you're pushing lanes, you're not farming coins, and you're putting the coins that you're holding close to the enemy's base and in danger of being taken away. So, yeah, it's got a lot of problems, I feel like, in that sense. I don't know. Like I said, I think Blackhearts Bay, it's super unique and interesting and different. So I'm glad that it's in the game. Unlike Garden of Terror, which I'm like, it's just, you know, the gameplay is fine, but it's just quite boring. I think Blackhearts Bay, the gameplay is completely wacky. But it's really interesting. And there you go. For me, it's a D tier map. Again, it's never featured at all, really. I don't think ever in ranked gameplay. It's just because it just doesn't work at that level. I would say if you're judging this just by quick match, it could actually maybe go a good bit higher in the tier list if you're just going by quick match. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Do you guys like Blackhearts Bay or not? Okay, in the C tier then, I'm going to put just one map in the C tier. And this one is maybe a little bit harsh, but I'm going to put Brax's Holdout into the C tier. If I was to take any map, again, I said I wouldn't rank this historically, so I'm supposed to rank this by how the map is now. So maybe I'm being a little bit harsh to Braxis, because I think the map has improved a lot, like a lot recently. And it's an okay map now. It's decent, I think, so that's why I put it in the C tier. But I have to be a bit mean, because historically, out of every map in the game, I don't think there's been a map which I have enjoyed less and which has given me more negative experiences with this game than Brax's Holdout. I think the original Brax's Holdout was absolutely terrible. A lot of those problems still persist today, but they've been mitigated quite a lot. But yeah, it was just awful design, and one of the really bad things with that Blizzard was I don't know. I either you guys, like everybody else, did sort of like it. I'm not sure. I know that I always hated it. But certainly, at the very, very least, it seems like Blizzard really liked it, because it was constantly there in the ranked queue. It was in pro play as well. So it was just a very, very, very frustrating experience. You couldn't get away from this map, and it was awfully designed. What do I think is the problem with Brax's Holdout? Why am I being so mean to this map? Well, it's a 2-lane map. Much like, actually, I didn't mention, but Haunted Mines is also a 2-lane map. With the 2 lanes in Braxis, I think one of the main issues that I had with this map is that it's very difficult to actually rotate between the 2 lanes. You've got the big boss pit in the middle separating them, so the path to get between the 2 lanes is actually quite long. So it really does cut down a lot in terms of the rotations and the stuff you can do. For the most part, a lot of the gameplay in Braxis is just, you got the solo laners just duking it out 1v1 in top lane, and you've got the 4-man teams just duking it out 4v4 in bot lane, and there really isn't all that much room on the map, unfortunately, to actually go and do different things, to do something strategic. It's just kind of bashing your heads against each other until one team wins. That was much worse and much more the case before. Since then, they've improved the map. They've made the Zerg swarm. The Zerg wave is very cool. I think it's a great mechanic. It's really, you know, it looks visually incredible, and it's interesting, unique, it's badass. They made it a lot easier to stop people channeling that Zerg swarm. It used to be much harder to stop that channel. So the map would snowball very easily. Also, before they had the XP changes, like a year ago, I guess now. Again, that first Zerg wave could be so powerful. And the XP, the bonus XP you got for destroying structures was so much that, you know, once your team could build up a big lead from just that one Zerg swarm, and the XP advantage could be so big that the other team would never have any opportunity to fight you again. If they just lost a fight on equal footing, now that you got one Zerg swarm, and again, the structures used to give just a big flat chunk of XP. That's not in the game anymore, but it used to be. The other team would get so far ahead that well, you just lost to them before. How are you ever going to beat them now that they're 2 or 3 levels ahead of you? It was just a horrible, horrible experience. I think the Merc Camps, again, they're the same Merc Camps as we have on Warhead Junction. I think those Merc Camps are pretty underwhelming, to be honest. They just don't feel impactful. I think that they took the idea. They said, okay, we've got the Siege Giants. You got 2 guys that do a lot of damage. And then you got the Night Camp. You got 4 guys that tank a lot of damage. What if we like swap that idea for the StarCraft maps? We've got 2 guys who are tanky and 4 that do a lot of damage. Won't that be cool? I think it turns out not really, actually. I don't know exactly what the number tuning on these guys is, but the camps just always feel underwhelming, and it feels really difficult to actually, go and take those and do something interesting with those camps. You tend to just be in the lanes anyway, so the camps feel pretty meh. One thing I will say, I do like the boss. I think the boss is really unique. He's got fun gameplay mechanics around him, the ranged boss. So I think he's fun. And there's like a good potential to contest that boss. I think there's good gameplay, taking the boss when you're very far ahead, but then also being able to min-max the, taking the control points at the same time. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that Braxis now, after a lot of changes to the map itself and to how XP and how the game works, has got to a point where it's okay. It can even be quite fun. But for pretty much all of its history, it was one of my most hated maps. Like, really hated that map. Like, it just made me miserable every time it came up. And genuinely put me off playing ranked in the game sometimes, because you'd have to play on Braxis, and it just sucked. Like literally in the when it first came out, 80% to 90% of the game was just draft. Just, well, they've got a stronger 4-man team. There's just no option for strategy. There's no option for... There's just nothing interesting you can do in terms of rotating. To like counterplay or to have an alternative strategy. It's just, well, they're always going to smash that bottom lane. They're going to get ahead and we can never come back. It just sucked. So yeah, C tier. Sorry, Braxis. I hate you. And even if you become really good, I probably always will hate you. So, but there you go. In the B tier, I'm going to put Towers of Doom. Towers of Doom, I think, is certainly from a competitive viewpoint, a really, really well-balanced map. It's got one of the very unique features where the objective actually doesn't generate any experience, right? When you take the objective, you take an altar and it fires shots at your enemy's core. It just does damage directly to the core. It doesn't actually give you any experience. So whereas in other maps, like obviously the, like the Zerg Swarm, for example, will smash structures and will actually generate XP for your team. Towers of Doom doesn't do that. So I think that actually has a very, very interesting and fun sort of gameplay implementation or gameplay effect that, getting those early leads on Towers of Doom, it still feels impactful because your enemy's core is lower. So it's just ever so closer to winning the game. And they're in a lot of danger in that sense. But you're not getting this insurmountable experience lead. There's always the opportunity for comebacks, and there's the opportunity to do other things around the map, which I think makes it quite interesting, actually. And Towers of Doom is a great map for comebacks. You can have some really epic sort of late-game team fights where a team can start to come back, but still, like, if they give up even 1 altar or 2 altars, they could lose the game. It can have some really cool gameplay. A couple of things I don't like about the map. I think a big part is just the art style. Obviously, the intent of the map is to be kind of like a gloomy Halloween sort of theme map, right? It's supposed to have that vibe. I think that puts me off it, though, to be honest with you. I just, I don't really want to play in a gloomy, depressing map, I guess. So that, for me, actually does drag it down quite a bit. And then I'm not sure what it is, though. I wonder if, that more balanced sort of gameplay style, the objective design, maybe in some way makes it less exciting. Because I can't quite put my finger on it, but for me, I do find Towers of Doom a little bit less exciting than other maps. I will say I'm not a massive fan of how the gameplay has broken down more recently. Where obviously instead of forts, you've got towers. And I think that's actually quite cool. When you destroy a tower, it just flips allegiance and rebuilds, and then you can take it back. That's a really fun mechanic. Instead of permanently destroyed structures, they just change sides. It's pretty awesome, actually. But I think when it boils down to it, perhaps, a lot of the gameplay in Towers of Doom is very simply, you take the 2 bottom towers, and then you just keep farming those sapper camps, which are a very cool mercenary, right? They're all about just suicide bombing in. They do big, massive structural damage once they get close enough to do their suicide attack, but you can stop them early, and they're very, very weak. or they'll bomb the core if they get past the towers. But yeah, I think like the gameplay often just boils down to that, right? Just hold the bottom lane, farm those sapper camps, and the top of the map kind of gets ignored. But I still think, it's a cool map with cool stuff going for it. And I certainly think, it used to be regarded very much so as a very, very fair, like competitive map, which has got quite a lot of value. Also in the B tier, and this might kind of shock some people, I'm going to put in Mora Temple. I think that's the old art for Mora, because that's, I believe, the boss from Mora, which obviously no longer exists because that map got reworked. But Mora is arguably one of the most hated maps of all time, but I actually think it's pretty good. I actually really like playing on Mora. I think it's really fun. Here's what I like about Mora. It's a 2-lane map. But unlike Braxis, I do feel like there's quite a lot to move around the map and to do around the map, and I think that's good. The Mercenaries on Mora they're the big highlight for me. You've got your turret camp, so you can fight the turret camp, which has an interesting sort of mechanic of the engineer who repairs the turret. But you kill the turret and you get the turret power up, which you can place down, and that really affects the team fight. So it's something that you always want to play around, is getting your turrets, collecting your turrets, and deciding when to drop them in the team fight, and then sort of playing around that area control and the damage those turrets can do. That's awesome. You got the big samurai, who's really realistically usually stronger than the map objective, hilariously. With a big samurai, again, he's got some fun gameplay to taking him, and he's very powerful, so it's something you really want to play around. And even the 2 vision camps through the middle of the map, which are very easy to contest and often flip sides quite frequently. You defeat them and it gives you a big vision radius, which usually has a very, very big impact in terms of controlling the payload, and obviously gives a lot of experience. That's one thing about Mora. The Merc Camps all give a lot of experience. And that's really what's interesting about the map for me, is that it's not really too much about the laning. The laning is still there, it's still something you do a bit of, but it's more so about rotating as a team and playing around the power-ups of the camps. And you've got those 3 different distinct flavors of Merc Camp, but they all have a very big impact on the gameplay. And yeah, you just have to consider the gameplay effect that they all have and make the most out of it, which I think is really fun. Actually, before I go into the big downside of the map, one other positive that I do like is the solo laning. I think Mora has a very different flavor of solo laning than other maps, which I think is great. So on other maps, typically the solo laners, it's going to be quite important that you've got like a good solo laner that can win the matchup. So for example, on Braxis, you quite want your solo laner to actually be able to go toe-to-toe and win, hopefully. Or it can also be very important that your solo laner can like rotate and soak multiple lanes, that sort of thing. Or fight Merc Camps, that sort of thing, right? On Mora, that's really not that important, right? The laning isn't overly important. And the Merc Camps are such a big deal that it tends to be something that you're really focusing on as a team. So the solo laner's not that big of a deal in that sense. And then being a 2-lane map, and like I said, the laning's not that important. Again, the solo laner as like a sort of soaking machine, that's not really a big deal. So it does open up a lot of cool heroes. Like I love playing Kira, for example, on Mora. I think she fits in really well there, where you can play a solo laner that is kind of a bit more focused on team fighting and engaging with the team and that sort of thing, the enemy team specifically. And I think that makes it really, really fun and unique and interesting and different. From a solo laning perspective, I think it's got a very different flavor than the other maps. The downside, of course, I think is the payload. The objective is quite boring. It's one of the weakest objectives in the game. You can fight really hard for that payload and to secure it, and then it does almost nothing. It fires shots at structures, but they really don't do that much damage. It just feels super undertuned. So I'm not sure exactly what happened with that one. So I think though with a balance pass that buffed that payload a bit, that the map could be probably a bit better. But yeah, again, that's the downside of the map, is that oftentimes it feels like the best thing to do is simply just farm up those Merc Camps as much as possible, and then you sort of capture the payload whenever you get a chance, I guess, or maybe push the map when you get a chance, but mostly just farm those Merc Camps and you'll be fine, which is a little silly. But there you are, Mora. I actually really like it, though most people, I think, don't. Okay, and then finally in the B tier, I'm putting in Volskaya Foundry. Let's put it there. Hilariously, whoever made this map list thing couldn't find the artwork for Volskaya Foundry, and they also couldn't find out how to spell it correctly either. So that's a little unfortunate here, but oh well. But yeah, Volskaya Foundry, I think it's a really good map, actually. I would say for me, I would rank it as probably the best one out of the B tier. Again, I think visually it's quite cool. It looks really great. You've got the same sort of Merc Camp thing going on from Mora. You have the turret camp, and the turret camp is such a big part of the map strategically. You do have like the, I don't even know what they are, like the trio of like gunning robots. I don't even know. On the side is kind of a split push camp. Now that for me is a bit underwhelming. I feel like this map, because of how the objective works, has got really good potential for split pushing, but I feel like that Merc camp is in particular is quite weak. So that split push potential never quite gets realized. So that does bring it down a bit for me in that ranking. I think if that Merc camp was more interesting, it'd be more exciting. And then I do like a lot actually the healing camp, which is again another camp you can defeat for a pickup, and that's like in the middle of the map, so easy to contest, but has again a very big impact on the team fight and the zone control. It's got a great map objective too. You have to control the point, you know. King of the Hill style, right? Just hold the map point to build up the charge, and then you get the protector. So you end up with having a lot of interesting team fights there, and again, playing around with the turret power-ups, playing around with the healing power-ups, that sort of thing. So that's quite fun. There's also the little conveyor belts, which tend to be around those control point areas, which spices things up a little bit. It kind of makes it that little bit extra and that little bit more interesting. I think the protector is pretty cool. I think when he first, he was quite too strong for quite a while. I think now he's maybe a little bit too weak. They're not too far off of it. But it's obviously a two-person vehicle that you can use to push down lanes. Which I think is quite interesting. I think the gameplay of the Protector is actually quite good. You've got the big charge, leap, and slam as the driver. The driver can shoot out his fist to like insta-kill minions and also disable structures. And then he can actually give a shield to his team to give them some protection. So I think that's quite enjoyable, actually. And then the gunner, again, it's kind of like you look at Cho'Gall. It's like Gall, but like a million times better. You've got your machine gun charges, and the machine gun does a lot of damage. That's hard to aim. You can charge up your Q for really long range damage, and then you've got your E laser, which is big and high impact. So I think again, that's really fun as well. There's also the counterplay that you can do. While one team is sitting on the point holding that point, if their enemy team feels they can't actually fight, they can go and they can split push. They can look to take other camps. They can look to push down lanes themselves. Obviously, there's opportunity cost to getting into the Protector. And that, for me, is maybe one of the downsides, is that sometimes it can feel a little bit too... The Protector now is, I think, maybe a bit too weak at team fighting. So that sometimes it feels like you get in the Protector and then you can kind of just get dove and your team gets killed because the Protector's a little bit underwhelming in that sense. So that's a bit weird. You kind of have to hop in and out of the Protector. It's a bit strange. But it is there. I think generally speaking, the map has got great gameplay. And there you go. Okay, and that's the B tier. Now we're into A and S. And we got 6 maps left. And I think these are the 6 best maps in the game. In the A tier, I'm going to put in Battlefield of Eternity. I think it's the best 2-lane map in the game. I think BOE, it's pretty solid. It's got pretty great gameplay, actually. So much like the other 2-lane maps, I think it's important to have a feeling that you can rotate and do some interesting things in the map. And I think you can do that on Battlefield. I think you got the 2 spear guy camps on the bottom, on top of the map, kind of midway there. So they're very easy to contest, very easy to invade. The camp, again, feels a little bit underwhelming, but at least it's something interesting that you can do that has high potential for interaction with the enemy team. Then I also really like the Bruiser camp, the Shaman camp, which is a very, very powerful split pushing camp that has a big impact. So again, timing that around the map objective, where you have to spend a lot of time in the middle of the map, does lead to a lot of interesting strategy stuff as well. The map objective is definitely a highlight for me in terms of gameplay. So you've got 2 immortals, 1 for each team, and they can spawn in a multitude of locations. And they have both defending and attacking consequences, which I think is super fun. So, like when you're attacking your enemy's immortal, that immortal can stun you. It can put down like a big stun circle around itself. It can put down stun circles more so at range as well. I think that's quite fun because it gives it a big defender's advantage. So when you're behind on the map, you always have that opportunity to get a good fight around your own immortal and protect it. And it gives it with an extra element of risk to attacking, which I think is cool. I also really like the halftime change of the immortals. So when you bring one of them to half shields, they'll swap positions. So that always leads to a big strategic shakeup and kind of break some stalemates. And I think that's quite a fun thing to do as well. I also like the fact that, hey, even if you're not going to win the race, You're not going to win the immortal race and break the enemy immortal's health down before they break yours. You can at least lower its health a little bit, which makes it, as the pushing objective, a little bit weaker. And then I also think it's a great pushing objective too. It feels very powerful with its shield, and the shield is what you're mostly fighting over. And then once the shield runs out, it becomes a melee pushing objective, which is a lot easier to kill. So yeah, again, I think it has great gameplay there as well. So gets a big thumbs up from me. One thing I definitely don't like about the map, it's kind of weird if you think about it, but you got these two immortals, wow, these super powerful heavenly beings blasting at each other in the middle of the map, and we have to go and help them, we have to participate. Well, you know, you don't. If you just leave them there, they're not going to do anything, right? They don't hurt each other at all. You can just leave them. They're basically AFK. So I always find that's a little bit weird. Like, this immensely powerful being is attacking this thing, and it's achieving absolutely nothing. It feels a bit weird in the flavor department if you think about it like that. It's kind of like, I feel like they actually should do something. Why are we fighting over these guys again? They seem quite useless to me. But anyway, there you go. BOE, I think it's the best 2-lane map in the game, and it's a really solid A-tier map. In the A-tier, I'm also going to put Sky Temple. Sky Temple is definitely a bit of a janky map. It's a bit of a weird one. But I actually really like it. Again, for a very large map, I think it does a good job of having interesting stuff going on. I actually like the gameplay flow of Sky Temple an awful lot. So you go into the early game, okay, and already you've got like interesting stuff happening with rotations, and you've got a vision point, which is actually very important to controlling rotations, and the first objective, which is always the top 2 temples. There's a vision point right beside that, so I think you just automatically have fun and engaging vision point gameplay, which is quite cool, and no other map really pulls that off at all. Like Blackhearts Bay has a vision point, but there's no real interesting gameplay that happens around it. That's all about the bottom half of the map. Sky Temple has the vision point where it matters, and I think that, you know, that's actually kind of interesting and unique. But then immediately you got the Siege Giants, and Siege Giants are probably the best Merc Camp in the game. You know, they take a lot of damage, so you have to invest time into killing them. They're tanky boys, but they also do a lot of damage from range, so they're a real threat, a real pushing threat. So there's always really interesting gameplay around Siege Giants, I think. And that's what you have on Sky Temple. Like, right at the start of the game, you know, you're looking to do there's opportunity for rotations. You know, if you got the vision point, there's opportunity to look for ganks perhaps top lane. But then you're also looking to make plays with those Siege Giants, right? And then you've got 2 objectives happening at once. You're playing around vision, you're playing around those objectives. You know, if you're capturing the middle, if you know the enemy team is capturing the middle objective, you know that they've had to leave 1 hero at least there. Which means that they only have 4 for the rest of the map, and you can make plays around that, which I think is really fun as well. Then you've got the Bruiser Camp, which again is quite an important thing to play around, and you can maximize that sort of pushing pressure because it is that big map. And again, the vision point provides some gameplay to make around that Bruiser Camp too. And then you go into the bottom temple, and that usually coincides, roughly speaking, with level 10. So you've got quite a big explosive team fight for that bottom temple. I think that's awesome. So you've got a great early game with lots of different strategic elements to it. And then you go into the late game. And then again, I think there's quite a lot of fun in terms of setting up meaningful split pushes. And then the boss becomes a very real objective too. Which obviously, you know, one of the ultimate throw pits is definitely the Sky Temple boss, which I think is quite fun. So that's what I like about Sky Temple. I really do like about it. I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on. The objective feels impactful, feels meaningful. It just feels like there's a lot of things happening around the map that are all very interesting and actually matter. I think that makes it a good A-tier map. Though it can be a bit janky and a bit weird sometimes. But yeah, I think it actually ends up working really well, and it's a good fun one. Also in the A tier, I'm going to put Tomb of the Spider Queen. I really like Tomb of the Spider Queen. It's a 3-lane map, but it's a very, very small 3-lane map. So there's lots of rotating, there's lots of interacting with the enemy team. Obviously, the mechanic of killing the enemy ranged minions, and they drop these gems, and you have to collect the gems, adds a sort of risk-reward. Where if you kill them on the enemy side of the map, you kind of want to go into that enemy side and grab those gems. When a hero dies, they drop gems. Unlike Blackhearts Bay, where, you know, you drop coins and the enemy team can grab them. I think Tomb of the Spider Queen does a better type of this, where the gems are team specific. So when a hero dies, there's, you know, a real gameplay moment where your team wants to pick up those gems so you don't lose those forever. The enemy team wants to stop you, and vice versa. And I think that actually ends up being quite good and quite healthy. I like that there's 2 turn-in points. So again, it opens up a lot of rotations. It opens up a lot of interaction with the enemy team and going, where are they? Can we punish them? Can they punish us? And I think that's really fun. You know, and you can kind of sneak gem turn-ins and all that sort of stuff. I think again, it's a pretty balanced map. You know, so long as you protect your gems and you play smart, there's always the opportunity to get a couple of turn-ins, perhaps even in a row, and to start to have a big comeback, which I think is fantastic. And I think the pushing objective is a fun one as well. The web weavers feel impactful, but they don't feel overwhelming because they're slowly dying themselves over time. So, you know, the snowball potential of the web weavers individually isn't that much, but it's more about just consistently playing the map well, which I think is great. And then the boss actually feels somewhat impactful as a kind of game ender as well, right? That when you do get a big lead, then in sort of the mid to late game, if you get some kills, you win a big fight, you do have the opportunity of a boss. And there's gameplay there where you can sync up a boss with the web weavers for a bigger push, that sort of thing. So yeah, I actually really like Tomb of the Spider Queen. I think it does a lot of things well. I think the Merc Camps, it's funny, it's interesting. The Merc Camps tend to not have that big of an impact because it's such a small map. They tend to be quite unimpactful, not that big of a deal. But the objective and the size of the map works so well in its favor that it still ends up being a really interesting and engaging map, despite having Merc Camps that aren't, you know, the minor objectives don't feel that important, really. So it does a really good job. It shows you how good the core identity of the map is, that it gets away with that. And then finally, in the A tier, I'm going to put Cursed Hollow in here as well. Obviously, I love Cursed Hollow. I think it's super fun. It manages, again, to be a really big map, but actually have interesting gameplay. I think, again, a big characteristic of Cursed Hollow is Merc Camps that really matter. I also love that there's two bosses, which are both very much favored towards one particular team. So there's, again, a really cool strategic element there of going, the enemy team's trying to capture their boss. Well, we can counteract even if we're behind, and we could take our boss if we're smart about it, if we play it well. You've got the tributes, and again, there's lots of interesting gameplay there because you need to take 3 tributes to actually have it do anything. So even if you're a little bit behind, you can sometimes decide to give up a particular tribute to try to mount a bit of a comeback and prepare instead to fight the next tribute, or maybe the one after that, that sort of thing. I think it's quite cool and quite interesting. Then you also have the curse, which I think an interesting thing about the curse is that it does matter quite a lot what you actually do with that curse. It's kind of about the plays that you create during the curse, turning off the enemy's structures and leaving their minions with 1 hit point. It obviously will do quite a bit of damage itself, but it's much more so about what you make happen, which again I think is a fun aspect. You know, it's actual gameplay that matters. So I think that's really good. One of the downsides perhaps of Cursed Hollow for me is that there's somewhat of an element of randomness to the game, like the tribute spawn locations. It's quite random, so that can be a bit of a downside. You know, like the team that has the tribute spawn opposite their siege giants, for example, is a classic area where, you know, it can be a little bit imbalanced. You know, the siege giant split push in the opposite side of the map is worth a lot more than having siege giants push where the tribute's going to be. So that is, you know, again, an element of RNG, which I think isn't that good. But on the whole, I think it's a really fun map. I always really enjoy playing Cursed Hollow. You got great team fights, got great boss fights, good strategic movements and merc play, and a fun objective. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me. Then finally, in the S tier, we got, I think, the 2 best maps in the game. We've got Infernal Shrines and Dragon Shire. Let's put them both in here. Boom. So, Infernal Shrines. I love both of these maps. They're both amazing. Infernal Shrines has got a really great objective. Where you have to collect these 40 skulls from these minions spawning on the point. So it opens up a ton of room for, again, gameplay and counterplay and strategy. Obviously, a team that's taking those skulls, they have to be like in there on the point. So they open themselves up to being engaged on. They open themselves up to the AoE damage. So there is, you know, there's that risk reward that ties in with it. There's also the fact that it does take a bit of time to collect all of those skulls. So that gives an enemy team the opportunity to kind of like choose their moment to take that advantageous attack. Or else they can look for like a split push. They can look for other things to do around the map while the enemy team has to pick up all those skulls. So, you know, I think that leads to interesting gameplay just by itself. Just the mechanic of collecting those things is pretty good. I also like the size of the map. I think it leads to interesting rotations. You've obviously got the really interesting split pushing shaman camp that you have from BOE. So that camp does great work here on this map as well. Then again, the spear guys are a lot less interesting. They're not the most impactful. But I do like that you do have the 3 of them and they're quite close together. So you can have opportunities for like stacking up 2 of them, those camps together in mid lane. We've got the one that's kind of midway, midpoint, so very contestable down the bottom. That's at least somewhat interesting. though it's not the best part of the map, I would say. And then what I really, really like is the Punisher himself. I think he's one of the most fun and interesting objectives. I mean, just straight off the board, there's 3 different ones, which have 3 different gameplay mechanics. The Arcane Punisher, who spawns these spinning laser beams, which do a lot of damage. The Mortar Punisher, who shoots out all these dodgeable circles on the ground at range that, again, do lots of damage. Or the Frozen Punisher, who puts down these large circles, which root you in place and disable structures. So there's tons of gameplay there. And then you've got the Punisher Leap as well, that he will jump over walls, jump over structures onto the first enemy hero he sees. And again, wonderful gameplay and counterplay to that. You can bait the Punisher to jump over into your structures and take him out while the enemy team can't follow up. And then there's great gameplay for the enemy team where they can dive in with their Punisher. Like, it encourages really aggressive gameplay, big risk but big reward, which I think is always fun and exciting, of going in with your Punisher and looking for kills, but underneath the enemy towers, so always in that little bit of danger. So yeah, I think it works really well. It's just, you know, you've got a great fun objective that feels powerful but doesn't feel overwhelming. There's lots of interesting things to do on the map. There's interesting rotations to make, interesting merc camps. The objective is fun. It's got upsides, but also has downsides for you taking it. So yeah, Infernal Shrines is a great map, and I am a big fan. Nice rhythm to it as well, where, you know, you can defend a fort with a wall pretty easily, but even just smashing that wall makes it much easier to dive with your Punisher. So a fort without a wall becomes a lot more vulnerable. Same thing with a keep. So there's a good rhythm there, where, you know, protecting those walls, so just those defensive lines, actually feels like it matters a lot more than it does on other maps, where the wall is just kind of, it's there, whatever. On Infernal Shrines, it matters, and I think that's fun. It actually makes use of that design, that layout. And then finally, Shire, again, my other S tier map. I'm a huge fan of Shire. I think it's probably the best map in terms of rotations and in terms of strategies between the 2 teams, right? I think ironically, it's very similar to Braxis, but it's like it does well everything that Braxis does wrong. So they both have this idea of these channel points, so you have to control both of them to make something happen. Where I think the thing that sets Shire apart and makes it actually a brilliant map instead of a pretty bad one is the 3rd lane. So straight off, instead of just controlling both points and you get the objective, it's actually you have to control both points, and now you have the opportunity to take the Dragon Knight, but that has to be channeled, that can be interrupted, or they can sneak out back one of the points while you go to take the DK. So there's lots of really interesting and fun gameplay there, and it does feel like you really have to earn that Dragon Knight to actually get it, which is great. I also think that the holding points works a lot better, because you're not just stuck in those lanes, just bashing your heads against each other, and the team that's winning has the point. Well, on Shire, you need to rotate into mid lane. You need to get that experience, and you need to come back, right? And it's just that rotation that adds so much more to the game, because, you know, you see, some of the enemy team went to mid lane. This gives us an opportunity to take back bottom lane, to take that point, or to go make a play of our own. So it's that rotation, that map movement that actually opens up the strategy to being cool. Again, you've got Merc Camps, and again, unlike Braxis, you can actually go and take the Merc Camps because of that need to rotate. It opens up more ganks on the top lane because, again, you've got rotations through the map, so you can decide to, you know, temporarily give up bottom lane, like rotate to mid lane, get that XP, and instead of going back bot lane, we'll swing up top lane, go for a gank up there, maybe take that control point, and great, now we've got control of top. We don't have to worry about the DK. We can come back. It's just really great. There's lots of stuff happening there, and it's all about mind games. It's all about strategy, and it's about how those players play against each other, which is what you really, really want. Merc Camps 2, Siege Giants, Night Camp, they are realistically probably the best Merc Camps in the game. They have the most gameplay attached to them, and it's fun. You know, the Night Camp in the bottom is a nice little touch, though it doesn't often get used, but it is there. It doesn't even need to be there, though. They could remove that Night Camp, and I think the map would work pretty much just as well as it already does. And then finally, you've got the map objective, the Dragon Knight himself. So it's a player-controlled vehicle, which is rare. Obviously, Garden of Terror used to be player-controlled. They removed that. And now we've got Volskaya Foundry has the player-controlled vehicle, which is pretty cool as well, the 2-player one. I think the Dragon Knight, it's a lot simpler. It's a lot more straightforward. And again, it just feels like a powerful pushing tool. You know, it's simple, it's intuitive to use, and it feels effective. But again, you want to sort of min-max the value of it. You don't want to take too much damage. You can interact with the minion waves and the heroes in interesting ways. You know, you got the Fire Breath, does lots of damage. smash the structures, minion waves. You can also use it for team fighting. The Dragon Knight, you can use him to smash the structures, but you can also turn around and start smacking heroes and make a good impact. And then you've got the Dragon Knight Punt, which is such a simple ability, but so effective in terms of moving people around. So yeah, I really like Dragon Shire. I think it's just fantastic. It's all about, you know, playing around the enemy team. You really have to earn that Dragon Knight. And then when you get the Dragon Knight, you have to play with him well. He feels powerful, but not, again, overwhelming. And yeah, it just gets a big thumbs up from me. And there you go, guys. They are all of the maps, all the battlegrounds that we have at the moment in Heroes of the Storm. And these are my rankings. So again, we've got lots of, I think, really good maps. We got some B tier maps, which I think are again, really fun. Though they have maybe some issues that make them, you know, probably a few things I think you could raise your eyebrows at on each of those maps. Braxis, which I personally hate, but to be fair, is sort of coming back as being actually maybe like an okay to good map now after a lot of changes. And then we got a few maps which are really bad, but let me know what you think as always. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.